Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're doing a tag. It's been a hot minute since the last time I did a tag video. I don't even know if I've done one since I came back to YouTube like a year and a half ago, so it's been a while, I think. But I love tag videos and I really wish that there were more going around. Back in my early days of BookTube, there were constantly tags, there were new ones popping up all the time, and I sadly see less of them, but I would love to see more, so let's do one. I was tagged by the lovely Flo at the Grape Jelly Library in the 8 books that hold my heart, stories and memories behind the pages tag, which was created by the Accidental Bookseller. And I will of course leave both of their channels linked down below to check out. This one is pretty self-explanatory. These are 8 books that mean the world to me, partially for the stories themselves, but also the stories behind them and the memories that I have with these books. So a good number of these books are ones that I read a long time ago, mostly at least a decade or more ago. A couple are more recent, but the majority are from my childhood up to my early 20s. And these aren't really in any order. I basically just grabbed them off my shelf as I thought of them. So let's just grab from the top of the stack here and work our way down, starting with my absolute favorite #1 book in the entire world, and that is An Absent Dream by Seannan McGuire. This is the 4th book in the Waybrow Children series, the first one being Every Heart a Doorway. I'm sure the vast majority of people have heard of this series. It is a very popular one, very divisive. Some people love it, some people hate it. I adore it, and I especially adore this 4th book. So for me, the reason why I love this series so much, and portal fantasy as a whole, is that when I was a kid, I actually used to look for doors. I lived close to a forest, and I used to go in the woods all the time, and I would look underneath rocks and behind trees in search of a door to a different world that I was convinced would take me away to my home. Now, as an adult, I can look back and understand that that behavior was due to being neurodivergent and also a little splash of childhood trauma, but that's besides the point. Or maybe it's the whole point. Who knows? But either way, I used to do that as a kid, and honestly sometimes still as an adult. Because you never know. I fully believe in fairies and all that fun stuff. I think the stories had to come from somewhere, so why not live in some whimsy and let myself believe that these stories are true? But yeah, so I used to do that all the time when I was younger, and I thought I was so weird for it, and then I discovered portal fantasy, and this was one of my first times reading portal fantasy, was the start of this series, and it was especially this series that really made me feel seen in that way. I felt a little bit less weird reading a whole series about kids who do the exact same thing that I did as a kid. And this book especially, in this book, the door that opens leads to the Goblin Market, and the first time that I read this book, I read those first few pages where we're in the Goblin Market, and I just sat there and cried so hard because it felt like this author just reached into the deepest part of my soul and managed to write what my home looks like. Because that was why I was looking for doors, is the same reason as these kids, because I've never felt like I belonged here. I've never felt like I fit in. Again, that's the neurodivergent speaking. And I was convinced that there was some portal fairy door that would take me away to the place where I actually belonged and to a place where I felt normal. And the world that is in this book is that world. The Goblin Market is based very much on logic and what's right and wrong, and there's a very clear boundary of what's fair and what's fair value in a way that just makes me feel so peaceful that I wish I could live in this world so badly. Since reading this book, I have always told my friends that, you know, if you want to understand a really intrinsic part of who I am as a person, read this book, because this is the world that I would go to if I had even the slightest chance of getting there. And extra special as well, for my birthday last year, my best friend found a signed edition of this book on eBay and she got it for me, so I'm very happy about that as well. That was very nice of her. Next up is A Psalm for the Wild-Built by Becky Chambers, another little novella. This is the first book in the Monk and Robot duology, and this book means so much to me because I read it at the perfect time. I picked up this book while I was going through a really hard time in my life. I was feeling very lost with my life, and especially with my career. I was feeling like a failure because I have this degree that I have never used and probably never will. I was working a retail job that, while I enjoyed doing it, it didn't feel like enough for me. I felt like I had to do more with my life than just working in retail, as if retail is an easy job that's not useful. And of course I understand that retail workers are very important and a huge part of our society, and now I have no shame against probably working in retail for the rest of my life. That's likely the path that my life will continue on, but at the time that was very much a sense of shame because I felt like I have failed my own potential. And then I picked up this book not really knowing what it was about. I just thought it sounded cute. Little did I know is that this book would change the way that I think about my life and my career and the choices that I've made, and just brought me a whole lot of peace. This book is largely about a sense of purpose and how people are more than just their jobs, and that it's okay to not have some grand purpose in life, and that the only purpose that you need is just to be alive, and that is more than enough. Human life is this incredible thing, and we don't need to do more. Anything that you do after that is just bonus, but just being alive is enough. And now I read this book whenever I'm kind of in a tough spot, whenever I'm kind of down on my luck and, you know, miserable with my job and all these things. I've actually just recently quit that job that I was miserable about when I was first reading this book less than 2 months ago. Just got a new job that I'm much happier with. It's also a retail job, but I'm treated much better there. I feel a lot more respected, a lot happier, and it's because of books like this that have made me feel okay with continuing as a retail worker and just being okay with that. So yeah, also a very important book to me for that reason. Next up is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I'm pretty sure this was the first V.E. Schwab book that I read outside of the middle grade series. What is it? Tunnel of Bones, City of Bones, whatever it's called. This was my first like full-length novel by them, and I completely fell in love with not just this world but also V.E. Schwab as an author, and now she is my favorite author of all time, and this series is probably my favorite by them. I can't really decide between this and Out of the Rue, but just given that this one is Portal Fantasy, it holds an extra special place in my heart, so it's probably my favorite by them. But also the memories behind this book are very strong. I don't think I read the whole series during COVID, but I definitely read this first book during COVID, and I remember so clearly when I was reading the ending of this book, I was sitting on the floor of my living room in the house that I lived in before I lived in this house, and I read the ending of this one, and I had this playlist, so I found the perfect playlist for this book on Spotify. Of course, I will link it down below, but that playlist is so perfectly suited for this entire series, but especially for this first book. I had that playlist going. I was sitting on the floor of my living room. The ending of this book just completely blew me away. The whole book in general was just phenomenal, and I remember sitting there feeling this grand feeling of holy shit, basically, when I read this book. And then I got up and went and talked to my best friend, who was my roommate at the time, and just gushed about this book. And this is such a visceral memory in what was a terrible time in all of our lives. This is one of the things that kind of kept me sane and brought any amount of joy during a very dark period. I will never forget the feeling of finishing this book for the first time. The story itself is, of course, incredible. I really relate to a lot of the characters in here. I see myself in quite a few of them. The world is incredible, and the memories behind it are truly special. The Brilliant Death by A.R. Capetta is another one of those books that I have very fond memories of. So in my early 20s, right after graduating from university, I went traveling. I went backpacking through Europe for a few months. It was a solo backpacking trip. It was the craziest thing that I've ever done. I didn't think that I would be brave enough to actually go and do it, but I did it. And the first 2 months of that trip, I was actually living and working at a hotel in the south of France in a town called Avignon, and I read this book while I was there. So the memories behind this book are fantastic for that reason, of course. I can still picture the cafe that I was sitting at in this beautiful little French village while I was reading the ending of this book. But the main reason why I love this book so much is that this is the first time that I can think of where I saw non-binary characters in a book or in any kind of media. I'd never seen that before. I was 20 years old when I read this book, and while I had already been out as non-binary to my friends, it was still very much a not well-known topic at the time, so seeing it in a book was something that I just couldn't even imagine. And not only are these characters both non-binary, but they both have magic, and they're able to use their magic to change their bodies at will. They're both gender fluid, and that was something that just completely blew my mind. I had never in my life felt so seen as I did when I was reading these characters just being able to change their bodies into whatever shape they wanted it to be that day, and not just going from male to female, but being able to change into water and wind and beautiful parts of nature into literally whatever they wanted it to be. And that was just something that spoke to me so well, and something that I've thought fondly of for almost a decade. Getting into my older books, the ones that I read in high school and before, I've got The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Chbosky. This is one of those books that I once again can so clearly picture exactly where I was when I read this book. The story itself is of course fantastic and meant a lot to me when I was reading it at this age. I think it had a lot to say that was really important and that I really needed to hear when I was the age that I was. I think I was around maybe 13 or 14 when I read this book, and I really did read it at the right time. But the reading experience that I had for this book, I remember it so clearly. It was a Saturday morning the night before. I had been planning on starting this book the next day, so I put it on my nightstand just to pick up whenever I felt like it in the morning. But I woke up on this Saturday morning, my bedroom window was open, it was raining very gently, and I just sat there and read this entire book in one sitting. And when I was about halfway through, there was somebody in my neighborhood nearby who was playing acoustic guitar, and that sound was just floating through the neighborhood with the rain and the cool wind and this beautiful, beautiful book. And that memory is so clear to me. This was quite literally 15 years ago, and the fact that I know what day of the week it was and what the weather was doing tells you how strong of a memory this book provided to me. I've read it, I don't even know how many times since then. I used to read this book all the time, over and over and over again. The movie is also fantastic, but of course the book is where it's at. But yeah, it was mainly the experience of reading it with the window open, the rain, and the guitar nearby that really made this book so special to me. City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. Not just this book, but the entirety of the Shadowhunters franchise. The books, the movie, the TV show, all of it mean the absolute world to me. I actually got a star tattooed on my shoulder when I was in New York when I was, I think, 19 to represent this series in the Herondale Star. But this was one of the first fantasy series that I got into. Not the absolute first one, but the first one that made me a fantasy reader. Before this series, I was mostly still reading historical fiction, especially World War II fiction. I don't know why, that was just my thing in the 8th grade. But this was, well, not the first fantasy series, this was definitely the most memorable and the one that got me into fantasy as a whole. And even more special was the amount of friends that I made because of this series. My core friend group in high school I met because I was reading this book and they had also read this book, and we all bonded over talking about it and reading it together. Most of those people I was friends with throughout the entirety of high school, a couple a little bit afterwards, and my best friend, who's been my best friend since high school, we partially bonded over our love of reading in general, but this was one of the first books that we had in common. So while I'm no longer the biggest fan of the Shadowhunter world, it will always have a very special place in my heart because of all of the memories that I have surrounding it. I remember it was the summer between grade 8 and grade 9 was when the Mortal Instruments movie came out, and I remember my friends and I, we were all hanging out for the entire day, and then we got all dressed up, we painted runes onto ourselves with Sharpies, and we all went to opening day of this movie. The movie sucked, but that's besides the point. I can still remember very clearly getting all dressed up and how excited we all were to go and watch this movie together. It was a lovely experience that ended in crushing disappointment, but whatever. And then in university, my best friend and I, we started hate watching the Shadowhunters TV series because those first few episodes were terrible. And then we gradually both grew to absolutely adore it, and it's still one of my favorite comfort shows to this day. I rewatch that show whenever I'm sad. She also loves it. It's still something that we talk about and reference all the time. But yeah, overall, I have over a decade of memories of this series. So even though I can see that it's not actually the best series around, I will always love it. Number 7 is Battle Royale by Koushun Takami. This book holds so many memories for me. Again, years worth of memories. So when I was in, I want to say grade 9, I think. A friend of mine at the time, she was starting a Battle Royale role-playing group online, and she was nervous about doing it by herself, so she asked me to join her, even though I'd never read the book. She just told me to pick a character at random to roleplay, and then I could read the book later on. So I chose the character Kaori Minami as my character to roleplay, knowing absolutely nothing about this character. And then a few weeks later, I read the book, and turns out that character was exactly me at that age. We were precisely the same person, and that was just such a weird coincidence that now, like 15 years later, I can still think of her name, even though I can't think of the name of the main character of the book that I'm currently reading. I'm not good with names, but this character's name sticks out to me so well because of the role-playing group. But I was part of that role-playing group for, oh god, I think about 2 or 3 years. It was a huge part of my life. It got me interested in writing. I made a whole bunch of friends from around the world that I'm sadly not in contact with anymore. I kept writing even outside of the role playing because I found that I really enjoyed it. Something that I don't currently do anymore, but I do want to get back into writing. But role playing this book online with my friends is what made me interested in writing in the first place, and I had such a blast doing it. I love the Battle Royale movies, the manga. There is so much good stuff surrounding it. Fighting with people online about how the Hunger Games stole this entire plot line and try to sell it off as their own thing. I would get into heated debates with people just for fun. I have a lot of memories with this book, and they are all so positive and joyful. beautiful. And yeah, I will always love this book for the rest of my life because of those memories. And finally, book number 8, and the book that started it all is Warriors by Erin Hunter. This book means everything to me because I would not be a reader without it. Maybe I would, who knows, but before reading this book I was not that interested in reading as a kid, but my grandparents gave me this book for Christmas when I was 9 years old and my life changed from there. I was a little bit of a reader prior to this, but just very casually, nothing really sticks out to me. I can't even think of anything that I read as a small child aside from maybe a few chapters of the series of Unfortunate Events and children's books like the Berenstain Bears and that kind of thing, but this was the very first series of my entire life that I was obsessed with. I used to make my mom wait outside the bookstore doors on release day of the newest books for this series. It was the only thing that I ever asked for my birthday. It was just a gift card with just enough money to buy the new release of this series, and this was my entire world for years. I do actually want to go back one day and reread the entire series as well as finish it out because I lost interest in it before it ever finished, and there are a lot of books that I have not read in this series yet, so I definitely want to do that one day. But yeah, I've had this copy for 20 years now. As you can tell, this book is very beat up. I've had it for such a long time. It just completely flops open. The pages are so yellowed. This is such an old copy that I love so much, and I will never get rid of this book for the rest of my life. But yeah, those are the 8 books that I thought of that mean the absolute world to me and the stories behind them. Thank you so much to Flo for tagging me in this video. It was so much fun to film. I love getting to gush about the books that mean everything to me, and especially talk about the reasons why they do and the memories that I have with them. I just think it's really special to be able to talk about the memories behind the books that I love so much and not just a more structured review, because I feel like my book reviews, both written and the ones that I film, are often just mostly focused on the structure of the book, the writing, the characters, the world building, as well as my general feelings towards them, but I very rarely get into my memories surrounding that book and where I was sitting and how I felt when I was reading the last pages of a book that I loved. I never talk about those things. So this was a lovely tag to do. I'll leave a few people tagged down below as well, but of course, even if I don't tag you specifically, please also do this video and let me know if you do it. I would love to watch yours as well. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world, and I'll catch you in the next one.